Welcome to Learning Plan 8. This unit will be looking at using Excel as a tool for calculating cost, volume, profit. The example here that we will be using is Spruce Enterprises. What they want us to do is to calculate for them the break-even in units that will get them to a profit of $10,000 when they have fixed costs of $25,000 and variable costs, which are 60% of sales. So we can see that data here up at the top. So when we attack a cost, volume, profit problem, the first place to start always is contribution margin. So let's remember back what our contribution margin formula is, which is contribution margin equals revenue minus all variable costs. So let's go on down to our spreadsheet here and just start calculating our contribution margin. And to do this, we're just going to use 10,000 units. And we know we've got above our per unit price is $10. Okay. So here we'll just go ahead and take 10,000 units times $10. We're getting a sales revenue of $100,000. Now, if our variable costs are 60% of sales, we could do a formula here. So we could take our revenues times 60%, and then we could divide by the number of units. Oh, that didn't work out. We've got, let's look at what the formula is doing. Times 60%, not divided. There we go. $6. So we also had that calculated for us up here. So we could have grabbed the $6 up here as well. Okay. So let's just go ahead and fill in what that is in dollars. We'll take our $6 times our 10,000 units. So now we want to know what our contribution margin is. The formula again was revenues minus variable costs. So we can go ahead and just say equals revenues minus our variable costs. But then we're also interested in the contribution margin percentage. Okay, so here, when we're talking about sales, it's always on sales. So this formula would simply be G19 divided by G19, or 100%. Variable is going to be G20 divided by G19, or 60%. And the contribution margin percentage is going to be G22 divided by G19, or 40% in this case. So we've completed the first step, which is calculating the contribution margin on a sample of 10,000 units. So let's continue on now to apply our contribution margin to now figure out what our break-even number of units are, along with the corresponding dollar amount. So you can see right here is the formula that we are going to be using to do this. So let's get started here. So what we're going to start with is just our fixed costs. So we're going to say equals 25,000. And what we want here is the contribution margin for units. So actually it looks like we forgot to calculate a cell up here. We want the contribution margin on a per unit basis. So let's just go ahead and subtract our variable costs from our sales to get $4. So now we can go ahead and grab that $4. And here it's going to calculate for us the number of units that we need to break even. So we got to build our formula and say cell G25 divided by G26 equals 6,250 units. Okay, this is how many units that we need to sell to break even at our business here at Spruce Enterprises. So if we want to know how that equates to revenues, we'll take our same fixed costs, okay, and we're going to divide by the contribution margin percentage, which we calculated up here. So let's finish out the formula here, equals G28 divided by G29. So if we made 6,250 units, that would be 62,500 in revenues, which would get us to our break-even point, or no net profits at all. So, you know, of course we want to make profits, and I think we might have neglected to mention, but the target profit that Spruce Enterprises wants to make is $10,000. So we can go ahead and actually just enter that $10,000 into the numerator here with our fixed cost and find out how many units we need to make $10,000. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to take our $25,000 fixed cost plus our net profit target. I'm going to go ahead and grab that contribution margin per unit, build our formula, equals G32 divided by G33. Looks like we have to produce 8,750 units to sell in order to make that $10,000. If we want to see that in terms of revenues, we'll take that same numerator, grab our contribution margin percentage, build that formula, G35 divided by G36. That comes out to 87,500 in revenues. So now we know that our break-even units and revenues, we know what number of units we would need to sell if we wanted to make $10,000. But let's take our knowledge a little bit further and say, okay, well, we ended up producing 12,000 units. You know, what kind of income are we going to have from that type of sales volume? So we can go ahead down here and just apply what we know. So if we actually had 12,000 units, okay, we can go ahead and calculate our revenues, which is our 12,000 units multiplied by our $10 unit sales price. We can also calculate our variable costs, which are 60%. Got to put my multiplication sign in there, times 60%. Actually, let's go ahead and grab the cell up above. Okay. And then we also know what our fixed costs are, the 25,000. So now I can just simply take my revenues, subtract out my variable costs, subtract out my fixed costs. And in the scenario where I sold 12,000 units, my profit from operations would be 23,000. All right, so now we have quite a bit of useful information for Spruce Enterprises. But what if we want to take it even another step further? Let's go ahead and save, when you're working along, when you do this exercise and you replicate it, go ahead and save it at this point, okay? What we want to do is to copy all of this information into a new tab so we can put in a couple different factors. So there's a couple ways to do that. You could click in this top corner here, right click and say copy, and you could go ahead and copy that. Click on sheet 2 and you could paste. Or if you want to do it the way I prefer, I just like to right click on this tab at the bottom, say move or copy, And we want to go ahead and create a copy, and we're going to move it before sheet 2, okay, and just say okay. And now you have a direct copy of the original sheet, and we could rename this and say scenario 2. Maybe by just right-clicking on a sheet, you can say rename. We'll say this one is scenario 1. All right. So now this is going to stay exactly the same. Let's move on to sheet 2. Anything we change on here will not reflect onto the first tab. Okay, so as I indicated, things have changed. Now we have fixed costs of $32,000. So let's just go ahead and type it in our data section. Now, since we built our formulas, we have faith that those are all going to flow below down here. Okay. And variable costs are now 45% of sales. And our desired profit that we want is actually $12,000. Okay? We can see how our data, as long as we used formulas below, which it looks like we missed one. Let's take a look at our formulas here. Right here is the culprit. See, I've hard typed in here 60%. That's what you don't want to do on your homework, because then it's not going to flow right. So I'm going to highlight that 60% and click on B5. There we go. Now we're seeing the 45% that we should. Perfect example of what I don't want you to do on your homework is to hard type in that 60%. We always want to grab it from up top for this very reason, so that when we do make changes on the fly, they'll flow down into our spreadsheet. Okay, I'm going to take a quick gander here to see if we have anything else amiss in our formulas. Looks like everything else flowed the way it was supposed to. So that was the only area where we missed grabbing that cell from above. But if you wanted to, you could take some time and just compare and contrast scenario 1 to scenario 2, you know, just by changing the fixed costs, how that impacted the number of units that Spruce Enterprises had to produce to cover the additional fixed costs, although their variable costs did decrease. So, you know, they could have evened each other out. I could see how this spreadsheet could be very valuable when you're coming up with your sales estimates during the budgeting process for a merchandise or manufacturing company. Well, this concludes Learning Plan 8. Thank you for joining me today.